What's up, people? The Grand Chess Tour in Romania started with 5 draws in the first round, and in the second round, Prague, Gamer, and NBL won their respective games to be the leaders. And in today's video, I'm going to show you the game between Deac and Jordan Van Foreest. So let's see if Van Foreest can reach the leaders, or if Deac can uh, set back after his loss in the second round. Okay, Deac opened with c4, e5 by Van Foreest. Maybe the most aggressive move against c4, because okay, against c4 you can play c5, symmetrical. Okay, it's interesting to play to win. You have c6 going for a semi-slav. Knight f6 is another normal option, but the reverse Sicilian is maybe the most aggressive way to fight the English. Okay, we have a Sicilian, but with reverse color and with an extra tempo for white. g3, g6. This move further is a little bit strange. There are no so much game in this position. Especially g3 here is so normal, but g6 is not so common. In general, in a normal Sicilian, with the pawn on e4 here, g3 is not the most common move. g6, yes, if white makes any move, knight c3 or knight f3, g6 is so common, but g3 by the player who have the pawn on e4 is not the most popular move. But okay, it's playable. c4, e5, g3, g6, and here the best response by Daniel Deac, d4, changing the center. It's so common after g6 to respond with d4, because after the trade, the rook on h8 is under attack, and the knight cannot eject the queen instantly. And knight f6, covering the rook, bishop g2, of course black eject the queen with a tempo. Knight c6, queen e3, and here he returned to e3 instead of to d2 to provoke bishop e7, because with the pawn on g6, the bishop wants to be developed to g7. And with this move, okay, you're not provoking bishop e7 because black have queen e7, but the queen is not so good placed on e7 too. On the e file you prefer the rook, and maybe the queen you want the queen on the d file to play d5. So that's the idea behind queen e3. Queen e7, now knight c3, normal development. Knight d4 attacking knight c2. Finally he returned to d2. Bishop d7, knight f3. Short castle. Till here the game goes completely normal. Now black have like two choices, or goes with try c6 d5, or c6 d6, or play just d6. And in the game, Van Foreest goes for c6. His idea is just cover the d5 square and later play d6 and make a normal development. But the machines prefer a little bit d6 without solve the cards of the c pawn, because the c pawn can go to c6 or to c5, depending on of what white makes. Or just can stay on c7 this pawn, because black is not threatening knight d5 or knight b5, so there's no necessity of play c6 so fast. And it's a useful move, but d6 is more flexible, I think. For example, if e4, now you can, instead of c6, you can play a rook e8 or knight d7, improving the pieces. Or if knight d4, here c5. That's the difference of having the pawn on c6. Knight c2 and bishop e6, and black is fine. But okay, c6 is a playable move by Van Foreest. Here white can play knight d4 too, because c5 now is coming into tempos. But okay, e4 is good, taking space in the center. d6, rook d1. The other problem of the move c6 is that now black have a weakness on d6 for nothing. Black have no counterplay for this weakness, and there's no necessity to create it, so d6 is of course the logical move. Rook d1, threatening d6 is the black weakness. Knight d7, and here I think that white just should take the pawn and just see if black can demonstrate counterplay or not. Of course, black here have counterplay because the bishop on d7 is open, the knight is so active on before here, for example, knight c2, rook b1, and now maybe rook e8 attacking the pawn. Black have good counterplay for the pawn, but maybe it's not enough to completely equal the game. But simply with white, I think that the easiest way to play here is just take the pawn, and let's wait if black have enough counterplay to equal or not. But at least you are not going to lose with white here. So I think queen d6, especially if you are facing a stronger opponent than you, is the best option. Just take the weakness, because if the problem of black position is the d6 pawn, and you have the option of take the pawn and you didn't take it, the black position is going to be completely fine if you doesn't take his weakness. So queen d6 is the best move here. Here maybe you can black can follow the initiative with rook e8, attacking the pawn, bishop f4, and just take knight a3, attacking c4, attacking e4, rook b1, knight b6, still attacking the pawn and developing the pieces, c5, knight a4, 3 pawns. Let's see that there are 3 pawns under attack. Yes, but I think that queen d6 is the best option. Instead of that, the Deac plays a3, maybe more positionally, knight a6, and queen c2. I suppose that he wants to, yes, to play free with bishop f4 before, but black here have this very strong move, knight e5, attacking c4, attacking f3, and after white have no good ways to defend c4. That's why he take, and after take, the pawn structure benefit blacks, because white have both pawns on the covering d5, but white have no pawns covering d4, and the d5 square is covered by the c6 pawn. So this pawn structure with the pawn on e5 and on c6 is better than the structure with e4 and c4 the majority of the times. Because okay, a black knight can land on d4, but a white knight cannot land on d5. It's more or less obvious that black pawn structure here is better. And if we watch the pieces are more or less the same. Both bishops are on d7 and d2 more or less bad place. But okay, normally placed. This black knight, okay, is in c3, but it's not jumping to d5, so I cannot say that this knight is better. The a6 knights have a root of c5, e6, d4. Both queens are developed, and okay, maybe white have the extra tempo, have the rook on d1 developed, but this is not enough to compensate the worst pawn structure that white has. So here he tried before. Bishop e3 here was a better option, just still developing the pieces, followed by rook d2 and maybe double rooks into the d5, or here knight d2 covering the d4 square was a good option. By the way, black is fine here, of course, thanks to the pawn structure. If in this position white was able to play c3 back, white have no problem, but the d4 hole is important. And before by Deac, not the best move, knight c7. The idea maybe with c4 with before was okay, take a space of course and avoid knight c5, but the knight can land to e6, d4 via c7, c5. And now I like just continue the plan with knight e6 followed by knight d4. White should defend, and now you can attack the queen side with a5, and if bishop b2, now attacking in the king side. I really like this way of threat the position, just attacking in both sides, and the knight is threatening 94, but okay, white control that. So now we start to attack in the queen side, white defend it, and now we go to the king side, trying to attack in every side of the board, and it's very difficult for white to defend every side, to defend the center, defend the queen side and the king side. So if you have the opportunity, you have at first to attack in both sides, you need to have some advantage in the position. But if you have the possibility of attacking both sides, it's a good idea, of course. Because it's not because if you only attack in one side, your opponent can put all the pieces in this side of the board and can defend. But if you attack in both sides, it's very difficult for the defender to hold all the position. Okay, instead of that, he played bishop g4, who okay, is playable too. F3 and bishop e6. This plan is acceptable. It's a good plan, but I just prefer the knight on e6, and I think that the bishop on c8 is making a good job. But okay, bishop g4 forcing white to play f3, weakening his king, and later bishop e6. I think this is a good plan, but not the best. Bishop e3, here f5 by 1-4. This is his idea. It's an interesting move. a5 here is the other possibility, but f5 is very good. Rook b8, f4, taking a space and opening this bishop. Very good move. Bishop f2. And here was better just keep the tension instead of take on g3 directly. I don't really like this move. I prefer a6. Maybe he take on g3 because he was afraid of g4, but after g4 you can play h5, for example, take and knight b5, and black is better. But so I don't like so much f takes g3. I don't really like this move. I think that here black will just keep the tension. F takes g3. F takes again a6 is a better move because white advantage is on the queen side. So white plan is going to be play a4, b5. So this is a prophylactical move stopping all the white attack, and you are threatening knight b5 maybe one day. Yes, maybe now black threat is knight b5. And knight b5, and if white takes, you can recapture with the a pawn, and the rook is open. Or if white doesn't take, you are attacking this pawn, you are entering on d4. So a6 is a very interesting move. Bishop f7 is normal too. He wants to go with knight to e6. I like this move too. b5. b5 is not my favorite move with white because okay, he wants to enter into b7 with the rook. Okay, white have advantage in the queen side, so he tries to enter in black side, entering with the rook to b7. But after knight d6, the rook have difficulties to enter to b7. And added to that, after b5, the c5 pawn is a weakness. So that's why rook d6 was better. And later, white is playing b5 of course, but I prefer rook d6 first. b5, just knight d6. Going to d4, going to attacking the c5 pawn, takes. And now white have the ability for, there's a weakness for nothing, the pawn on c5, and the rook cannot enter to b7, so I don't know what black makes with his plan of b5, and the rook cannot enter because the queen is defending. But okay, 92, sorry, normal move, covering the d4 square, rook a d8, logical, and the rook on a8 is not making nothing, so let's trade a pair of rooks. Queen here, queen c7, defending the pawn, queen e6, logical plan by white. He wants to enter with the rook to b7. And here, Foreest playing knight g5, which is not my favorite move. Here, black can just avoid the plan of rook b7, for example, trading here and playing rook b8. He takes the control of the open b5, and okay, white have the control of the d5, but the rook cannot enter to d7, cannot enter on d8 if rook d6 just, for example, if rook d6 just black have this type of moves. It's not clear that the b5 is better than the d5 is better than the b5. I think that the black rook here is better than the white rook. Rook d7 is another interesting move. The idea is that if black takes and rook b8, which is the idea, here black have queen d1, followed by queen d2, and the queen on d2 is very active, and black is in some troubles. Rook a7, and now bishop a6 or h5, just attacking the white king. And here the other very interesting move, instead of move the pieces, okay, black can take on d7, on d1 or rook d7, but he have the pieces more or less fine. So that's a good moment for push with h5 and try to attack one day the white king. Because okay, the knight is well placed, the bishops are well placed, the queen is well placed. The rooks, okay, you can make things with the rook, but the rooks are more or less solid. So h5 here is an interesting move. Okay, he plays instead of that knight g5. His idea, I suppose, that is attack the f3 pawn one day. f4 by Deac, avoiding that. Knight e6, f5, and knight g5. Of course, the idea of Foreest is provoke the f pawn to advance, weakening the white king. Is logical. Here, knight d4 was slightly better, because if white takes, sorry, yeah, you can take with the rook maybe too, but here the queen is attacking the g3 pawn, so fuck. My computer is fucking crazy. Okay, queen e3, and the queen is open here, so knight d4 is very interesting. Instead of that, he returned to g5. Here have less sense, because in this move I understand knight g5 because you are attacking f3. But here with the pawn on f5, the move knight g5 have not the same sense. Okay, g4. But here I really like the plan made by Foreest, because the position is equal. Now we are in the move 30 and the position is 0-0-0. But I really like the plan made by Foreest because he executed. He made a straight plan, going for the white king, employing his pieces in all the moves, and white doesn't make nothing during this time. So he started with g takes f5, good move, opening the e file. h5 is another possibility, but I really like the plan made by Van Forest. He takes f5, because he won in this position, who is equal. He won the position more or less easy. With g takes h5, he takes, and now king h8. The idea of king h8, of course, is rook g8 and bishop f6. The machine prefer rook d1 and bishop f6 or bishop h5, but I really like the plan made by Van Forest in this game. Knight g3, rook d8 and knight g3 is another option. Taking this pawn, but black have good counterplay. Okay, knight g3, rook g8. Black is still improving his pieces. Let's see that in the last 3 previous moves he trade king h8 and rook g8, improving his rook and his king. Queen e2, white tries to defend with the pieces, and now comes the key move of the black attack with rook d4. Great exchange sacrifice, activating the rook, blockading the d file, if avoiding trades, because if white wants to trade the rook, now after it takes d4 and the diagonal is open for the queen, it's not the same that sends trade rooks into the d file. So very good move, trying to keep pieces over the board and attacking. Let's see what happens, for example, if white takes the rook with the bishop. Bishop takes, it takes here e5, very good move. Trying to close files and opening the latest square bishop. Bishop takes, and now the key move rook b7. And if very good move, you cannot take because queen here. So bishop c4, another intermezzo move. Rook c7, bishop takes, and the position is more or less equal. So bishop d4 is playable, but you should watch e5 and rook b7, so it's not easy to play in plain trouble. Rook d4 followed by rook b4 is another possibility, but like I said, you are opening the diagonal for the queen. Or rook b4 is another good move. White needs to trade pieces. If all the pieces keeps over the board, white is going to have some troubles. So white need to trade some pieces. Bishop e3, mistake, and now bishop f6. The machine doesn't criticize so much bishop e3, but after bishop f6, again improving the position, opening the g file and improving the bishop. Here the problem is that the position is very difficult for white. He should return with bishop f2, which is not an easy move because you play bishop e3 in your previous move. So it's of course not easy to return to f2, very hard. And the other possibility here is just taking 2 tempos. But like I said, the bishop e3 is a mistake because in your next move, your only 2 safe options are, or both options are move against the bishop, or return to f2, or take on d4 into tempos, who have now so much sense. But okay, this transpose with c5 to the line that I saw before. And bishop f2 to have the one square here. King h1 was playable. After bishop c4 have queen h5, but okay, black is better there. After king f2, the decisive mistake of the game, according to the machine, but here bishop e3 puts some trouble for white. Bishop f6 and king f2. Here, this decisive move, bishop c4, just give the game for white, for black, sorry, because let's see, all the black pieces are very active. The knight is active on f6, the bishop is fuck. So the bishop is active on c4, the rook is active on d4, the bishop is well placed here, the rook is in open file, and if you take here one day, the queen will be open. So black position is very active, and the white king have now a safety place. So he tried queen h5, and now queen g7. The 4 pieces, the last piece came to attack. The 4 black pieces are in an attacking task. Queen h2. And now when you play all your pieces perfect, games the tactics. 94, bishop takes, rook takes. You cannot take with the knight because bishop h4, queen g2, and queen e2. But it's the consequence of place all your pieces in the correct square that the tactic appears. Sorry. Rook e4. He cannot take with the knight, so for that reason he played rook b7. Here rook f4 and take the rook just was easier. By the way, he played queen b7, 94. After queen b2, both players get extra time. In the move 14, rook d2, queen b1, knight g3, e4. Now black is completely winning because the white king is very exposed. e4, rook d7, queen b2, rook d2, queen a1, rook d7. They repeat a couple of times, and now he changed with queen e3, knight a4, and now gains a very good combination for black. Queen a1 with all four moves. Queen e3, again important, bishop d5, knight f6, and okay, black sacrifice a piece, but now gains a 4 sequence who gives the victory for black. Queen g1, rook g2, queen b1, this is the key check. Queen a1, the king cannot escape. Queen e3, queen b3, queen c3, and bishop e2 with checkmate and winning the game. So I really like this game because okay, if you take with the rook here, queen e1 is the idea. So very interesting game. At the start of the game, first Deac take a good position if he take on d6 after the mistake of c6 by Foreest. He could have a good position with queen d6. Later he missed without taking the pawn, and Foreest reached a better pawn structure. But okay, the game turns so very complicated. But finally, with his plan of very interesting, this 95, 96 forcing the white pawn to be on f5, opening more the white king. But yes, the moment that I most like in the game was this plan of take on f5, king h8, rook g8, now very important, rook d4, bishop f6, and all the pieces are playing bishop c4, and now after queen g7, the 6 black pieces are playing. So very good game of Jordan Foreest, who takes the leaders after 3 rounds. So let's see what's still happening in this tournament. Bye bye.